Do you want to be healthier, yet you just don't know what to do? All these shows telling you this and that, but nothing seems to work. Well, listen close. Golden State Media Concepts has got something great for you. The Health and Wellness Podcast dedicated to workout trends, healthy eating habits, diet, and everything about healthy living. Join us in our banters as we help you not just live life to the fullest, but live it to the healthiest.
Thank you for tuning in to the GSMC Health and Wellness Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Alex. With all of this coronavirus buzz going around right now, you guys, I am really wanting to talk to everyone today about how to stay well while practicing social distancing. I know that it's really difficult for a lot of folks right now and being scared about what's going on. But I hope that our previous episode on coronavirus helped everyone to approach it from a place of knowledge and preparation rather than panic. That is my overall goal with these podcasts for you guys. So today, first, I want to discuss the differences between what quarantine and isolation generally mean. And then we're going to talk about how to stay healthy and well in the emotional and spiritual and physical aspects while folks are stuck indoors. So first off, we see these words quarantine and isolation being thrown around a lot, and they're used very different colloquially than they are in the public health realm. So when we're talking about quarantine versus isolation in a public health perspective, such as what the CDC uses, then quarantine means when you are not already known to be sick, but you may have been exposed to a disease, although you're not symptomatic right now. So it restricts your movement to see if you become sick. So quarantine tries to keep you away from other people and keeps you from going out and about a lot to see if you become sick. And that way we're not risking you spreading anything in the meantime. Now with isolation, that means a person is already known to be sick. So we already know that that person is infected and they are potentially infectious. That means they can potentially spread it. So that is the process of separating people we know to be sick from people who are known to not be sick. So in that case, a person who is isolated is told to stay in a separate room from other people in their homes and use a separate bathroom to try to keep the people who are not sick in the home from becoming sick. So in this case, the sick person in the home is in isolation, whereas the other folks in the home who have been exposed to them but who are not showing any symptoms are in quarantine, even if they are in a similar area. So the separation between those two is the difference between whether or not a person is symptomatic and exposed. So, to put that into perspective, remember when we had swine flu going through the U.S., about 10 years ago, I think. I was an undergrad at the time, and I did come down with swine flu. I went to sleep on a Monday with it, and I did not wake up until Wednesday night at one point because my fever and the exhaustion from it were so bad that I just did not wake up for over 48 hours. It was pretty mind-boggling. But at that time, because everything was so scary, like it is now, they had told us in our classes and on the school's news channel that if we were to become sick with the swine flu, that we should stay in our dorm room and confine ourselves in that manner, because there wasn't much else that they could do for us at that point. they just wanted to prevent the spread. So as soon as I started exhibiting any symptoms, I let my roommate know, and she and her boyfriend, who stayed in the room with us at the time, went and quarantined themselves at a friend's house who had also been exposed, but not expressed any symptoms at that point. So I was in isolation in my room and made sure I didn't go out and affect anyone else. And my roommates went out and they quarantined themselves with someone else who was also in quarantine. And they didn't get swine flu. So even if I had already been expressing these symptoms at that point, and they didn't know until I knew that I was sick that they were at risk for it, they were still able to prevent themselves being sick with it as well, because they followed those quarantine protocols and I followed the isolation protocols. And I emailed my professors and was like, hey, I have swine flu. I am in isolation and I will be in class as soon as possible. If you have any assignments that you can send me in the meantime, I will catch up on them as I'm able to. So I did not send them that until Wednesday, because when it hit me, it knocked me on my butt. It hit me really hard. But I had Gatorade and water and everything in my room so I could keep up on my electrolytes and hydration in the meantime. Although I could not go out into the dorm common room to make food. So I couldn't go out there and cook or anything either. But, I wasn't able to eat much at that time anyway, because it was a flu, so it was neither here nor there at that point. What I am overall getting at is that isolation and quarantine are two separate things. It's important that we understand the difference between the two. And even if you are in contact with someone who has swine flu, if you follow the isolation protocols laid out by the CDC, then you very well may still be able to protect them from being sick as well. Everyone just needs to be conscious of what we need to be doing at this time and washing our hands, educating ourselves on the differences between isolation and quarantine, proper hand washing procedures, and so on and so forth. I addressed a lot of that in our previous episode about the coronavirus update, so please do reference back to that if you would like to know more in depth about what the CDC recommends. And also check out their website. They are updating their website with information every day, Monday through Friday at noon. So they are there along with the World Health Organization and Johns Hopkins University to give us the scientific and factual components of what is going on with coronavirus in the meantime. So, I know that everything's scary, but if we go ahead and prepare ourselves with knowledge, then we can move forward proactively instead of reactively in a panic. Because I totally understand that we are all alarmed at this point, but it's also important to maintain our heads and keep a sense of calm so that we can react positively in these situations. So, with isolation, you may know folks who are becoming isolated at this point or who are in quarantine, and that can be really difficult for folks to experience. I did an episode on loneliness a while back, and subjective loneliness can be really difficult for a lot of folks. Over 75% of adults in the United States say that they are lonely. Making ourselves isolated through isolation, quarantine, and also just practicing social distancing. So social distancing comes before you are exposed to anyone, just to try to prevent the exposure that would require quarantine, or if you become symptomatic, eventual isolation. It can be really difficult for a lot of folks. It's not as hard on some of us as others. So for my fellow introverts, this may not be as rough on us, especially if, like me, you already work from home, as it is on a lot of other people. The extroverts are going to be having a lot more difficulty with this in many ways. So check on your extrovert friends. Go ahead and FaceTime them. We can love people from afar here. We can also go ahead and call them. We can text them. We can also send the messages on any of the messaging platforms. But it's important to be able to still talk to each other and combat that loneliness while we are still being safe from a public health perspective. So we want to protect ourselves and each other in the physical sense, but we also want to look out for ourselves and each other in the emotional and spiritual and mental sense. So while everyone is worrying about getting sick, I also want you guys to keep in mind that it's important to consider your mental health. We don't want to stress out too much because stressing out promotes those levels of stress hormones in your body and can also make you more prone to becoming sick, as we discussed in our stress episode. So I think that knowledge is a great combatant against stress, and I'm going to help you guys with that as much as possible. We're going to go on a quick break, and when we come back, we are going to talk about what spending time indoors can do to our health, well-being, and productivity. Stay tuned.
Are you looking to learn more about the latest trends from the fitness world? Are you confused by all of the different trends that are out there? The GSMC Fitness Podcast is the place for you. The GSMC Fitness Podcast is the place to come for people of all skill and interest levels. Join us as we explore the latest trends in the fitness world. Does that new exercise really work? Should I try yoga? Whatever your question, chances are good you'll find an answer on the GSMC Fitness Podcast.
Welcome back. Before the break, we were talking about coronavirus and the differences between quarantine and isolation. Now we're going to talk a little bit about what that can potentially mean for us in our health and well-being as we all spend more time indoors and practice some social distancing. So with the advent of the internet, we've all been spending more time indoors overall. There's not as much need for a lot of folks to work outside, and indeed, if you live in certain climates like I do, it can be very difficult to work with your computer outside because it will start overheating in the sunlight and the heat of Texas during certain times of the year. It's already about 85 degrees here this week, so even though it's early March, that's going to be pretty difficult for working outside in Texas, even with coronavirus notwithstanding. So for a lot of folks, we're spending more and more time indoors, so folks are more likely to have vitamin D deficiencies, since we do derive 90% of our vitamin D, particularly D3, from our environment with the sunlight. So our body uses that sunlight exposure to manufacture vitamin D, and only 10% of it, as we've discussed before, comes from our diets. So that is something important to keep in mind. We also sit here and look at our screens a lot, and that can really mess with our natural circadian rhythms. Modern society also prioritizes a lot of high-pressure careers at this point, where we're all putting our careers first, and that often leads to our happiness and our mental and spiritual well-being, our emotional well-being second or 50th, depending on what our other priorities are at the time, like our families and everything else we have to worry about. This always-on type attitude when it comes to work can really mess with your natural biological rhythms. It can really also stress you out. So collectively, these factors can really take a huge toll on our health and our happiness. So this is the indoor generation, is what some folks have come to call it. And sometimes they mean it to be disparaging and sometimes not. Personally, I don't really take offense to it because I do spend a lot of time indoors. I have to consciously make an effort to go outside and obtain sunshine because my volunteer work and my actual paid work and my hobbies, everything that I do right now is primarily on the internet. On the one hand, super unexpectedly helpful for coronavirus. On the other, it is not so great when it comes to emotional and mental well-being, and in some ways, physical well-being, because you have to go out and get that sunshine for your body to really feel healthy and well. Now, they've done some recent reports with international research to highlight how much time people truly spend inside. And the perception versus reality is very interesting. A lot of folks don't really seem to comprehend the amount of time that we spend inside. It's easy for that to slip our attention. It's hard to realize that it's been, 48 hours since you've been outside of your home when you are binge watching The Office or you are dealing with a lot of work that you've brought home with you because you have crazy deadlines or you are studying for some huge tests in school. So there was a study that surveyed 16,000 people across 14 countries in North America and Europe, and they found a significant disparity between how much time people thought they spent inside versus the reality of how many hours per day they're actually spending indoors. A lot of folks said that they thought they spent around 2/3 of their time inside, but the actual number is far higher. Previous research found that 90% of folks spend close to 22 hours inside per day, and 1 in 6 people who responded to that survey admitted that they practically never go outside, spending up to 24 hours per day indoors. Now, I know for a fact that that is certainly true for me. My friends will ask me, "Oh, what's the weather like out here?" And I will go to Google it rather than stepping outside, and I just automatically go to Google it because that's part of my personal habits. I spent a long time not going outside, and it's like, I actually don't know because I haven't been outside in days. So at one point, it was super cold here a few weeks ago, and then within a week, it had warmed up, and I went to go out somewhere with my friend and who had come over to my house, and at that point, I was like, oh, okay, let me go ahead and put on like this heavy jacket and everything I've been wearing the last time I went outside. And she's like, what are you doing? It is warm out. You're going to be sweltering. And I was like, oh, no, it's been cold out. And she's like, when was the last time you went outside? And I was like, I don't know. And I stepped outside, and sure enough, it was way too hot for like knee-high boots over leggings and a cardigan and everything. So, I shucked the cardigan and kept going. I gotta keep my commitment to that Han Solo style. But it is just something that a lot of folks don't think about, whether we are going outside or not. I know in my case, it's probably a bit more extreme because I am so introverted and I do work at home and all of my hobbies are online and everything. But it seems that across the Western globe, at least, it is fairly on par with what a lot of other folks are doing. So if you think about it, you go outside and then you get in your car, and that is one factor of it that you may consider being in your car as being outside or not. I think if your windows are rolled up, it doesn't count. But you go ahead and you get in your car and you drive to work, and then if you work indoors, you go inside and you work at your computer for your 8 to 9 hours. Then you go out and you get back in your car and you drive home. And then you go ahead and you cook your dinner, you binge watch your favorite Netflix shows, and you go to bed. A lot of folks don't spend time outdoors. And even if you are able to go and spend your lunch hour sitting outside, like I used to when I worked in an office in a tech center, it's still not that much, especially if we're not counting that time in the car. So that's just my lunch hour at that point, especially now that my new apartment doesn't have a patio. So my last one did, and I spent a lot of time outside on my patio and would try to read for at least 30 minutes per day out on the patio to get a little bit of sunlight. But again, that 30 minutes is not a lot in the grand scheme of how many hours we are actually given per day. We have to spend 8 working at least and 8 sleeping. Hopefully, we're getting that 7 to 9 hours that sleep specialists tell us we need. But at the end of the day, a lot of us are already spending 16 hours at least indoors. And then what we do with the other 8 that we have left is truly up to us. But I say that as though everyone works 8-hour shifts, and they don't. A lot of America works in plants, and those tend to be some 12-hour shifts, or you may work swing shifts. So when you are off work, it is dark outside. I worked swing shifts for a long time, and I slept through a lot of the day, and then in the evenings, I would just kind of go straight into work. So it would be a lot of effort for me to really get any sunlight at all. And getting that sunlight when you're working night shifts or swing shifts can also mess with your circadian rhythm. So I think that at the end of the day, what coronavirus is really making us more aware of is that a lot of jobs could be done from home, but a lot of them still can't be. And we need to be cognizant of that for other folks who are still having to go into work, because this is an artifact of our socioeconomic system at this point. I don't know how each of you feel about healthcare or who you're voting for. That's none of my business, but I do think that there is a problem right now in which everyone who is coming down sick is not able to stay home, because if they do, they will go bankrupt at this point. We have a problem with how much money folks are making and with our policies for who can work at home and who can't. Even for the jobs that are capable of being done from home, a lot of companies aren't flexible about that, and it's very problematic for everyone involved. A lot of companies don't have healthcare or affordable healthcare for their employees, and healthcare in this country in general, whether it's private or if it's through your company, etc., is very problematic because folks can't afford it. And if you can't afford healthcare, then you are just going to be sick and going into work and spreading it to other people. So there's a lot of problems that we're facing right now that several of us have been talking about for years, but I think it's going to become more in the spotlight as coronavirus continues. But overall, it's really important to think about the time that we spend indoors generally, and perhaps use this cabin fever we may all start getting here in a little bit in our isolation and quarantine and our social distancing to think about how our world around us, how our current system is problematic and how we may improve that, particularly as we move forward into the 2020 elections. And in that regard, if you are eligible to vote, remember that even with coronavirus going on, we can mail in ballots at a certain point. Keep that in mind. All right, we're going to go on a quick break, and when we come back, we're going to talk about home wellness. If we're going to be at home, we may as well be practicing home wellness.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. Hey! The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
we're talking about the indoor generation and how folks tend to underestimate how much time we spend indoors. We are about to all become very aware of that as we practice social distancing and isolation and quarantine, depending on whether we are personally exposed to coronavirus and if we become symptomatic for it as well. So in the meantime, as lots of folks are moving to working from home, for the folks who are able to work from home, let's talk a little bit about home wellness, because if we're going to be there, we may as well be doing our best to maintain our emotional and spiritual and mental health as we all kind of get cabin fever at this point. Home wellness can help us prevent a lot of those issues from happening. So first off, what is home wellness? Well, that is actively creating and maintaining a healthy, balanced home. A lot of us feel like our home's probably a pretty healthy place. It's clean enough. It may be a little bit cluttered, especially if we have kids. It can get a little bit messy, but it's clean. It's just cluttered at that point. But we have to really define what a healthy home is for us. There have been studies that say that our environment, like how messy your desk is or how messy your room is, can have an impact on your productivity and on your mental health. It's not something that we tend to think about day to day, but it is something that is an issue. So we define home wellness as just actively pursuing maintaining a healthy, balanced home. They've performed research over the years and found that most Americans think that a healthy home is important, but about 3 in 5 Americans also think that their home is not as healthy as they would prefer it to be. So a lot of folks are super busy. We don't have time to come home and clean after we have been working all day, especially for those of you who have long commutes or you have other commitments that go along with work, like you have children or your kids have a lot of after-school activities or you have volunteer work or multiple jobs. A lot of it is time we don't have, and for a lot of us, it's also you just don't have the energy. So we've learned that there is also a strong feeling in the U.S. that good quality indoor air and water are some very important factors for home wellness. So keeping that in mind, as everyone's rushing out to buy packs of water, Flint still does not have clean water. They've not had it for a long time. So this is not new to them, even though a lot of Americans find that good air quality and clean water are 2 of the most important factors for your home's wellness. 61% of Americans think that outdoor pollution is worse than the air inside your home, although the air inside your home could actually be up to 5 times more polluted than the air outside. That is somewhat surprising to me, but if you're just recycling that air back and forth inside your house, then that very well may be the truth, particularly if you have other allergens or irritants in your home, such as cigarette smoke. Wearing shoes inside the home is something that 50% of Americans do, and we also think that that isn't a huge factor for our health. If you take your shoes off inside, and so does everyone else who comes into your home, that's different. I personally am part of the 50% who has the shoes at the door, so I have a little rack for everybody's shoes when you come in, and everyone takes their shoes off at the door. And I generally ask guests to do the same thing. You know that if you come over to my house, we're taking our shoes off. Partly, I just don't like to wear shoes, but also because I don't want to bring those germs from outside into my home. A lot of folks think that taking your shoes off inside is just so you keep your floors cleaner longer, and that is what 77% of folks say. 47% say that it's more comfortable. However, 36% of Americans remove their shoes indoors because they know about the air toxins that come inside with their shoes. You can bring in E. coli, pesticides, and even particles from feces that have attached to your shoes and can come inside your home. So I have house slippers, and they are Ninja Turtles, so I make that fun for me. They are Raphael Ninja Turtle house slippers, but I also have slippers available for guests if they want to wear little slippers inside my house too. I have extra robes and stuff, so we can all just kind of be in our PJs and chill. I'm a PJs and chill kind of person. So everyone is different, but you may want to consider adopting a policy like that as well as we move forward with the coronavirus. When we have air filters in our homes as well, it's important to change those. A lot of those need to be changed about once per month. 33% of Americans forget to do that because you can't see them. So they're very much out of sight, out of mind. And that is something that can be difficult to do. For me, if I go to the front office of my apartment complex to pick up a package or to go pay rent, then I'm going to pick up an air filter at the same time. You want to make sure that you change those to prevent negative health impacts in your home. It can help with allergies and asthma, but also it helps out the health of your air conditioning unit. If your air conditioning unit is leaking fluid, it may just be getting clogs from the filter not being replaced. You can actually reduce the energy consumption of your AC system by as much as 15% just by replacing your filter. Now, with clean water, 64% of Americans are concerned about the quality of their drinking water, and 51% regularly drink bottled water at home. That is a lot of plastic. For perspective, Americans drank 13.7 billion gallons of bottled water in 2017. So 72% of Americans say filtered tap water tastes as good as bottled water, but 51% still drink bottled water at home. So these are some of the important aspects of home wellness that we really want to keep in mind. And when you're thinking about your own home wellness, think about what's important to you. Is it your air quality? If so, think about changing out that air filter, particularly as we go into perhaps being stuck in our homes for a while. Make sure that you're thinking about clean water. If you're not going to be able to get out for a while and buy bottled water, then you may want to purchase a filtering system. That's just good for the environment in the long run anyway. But you can also think about when you're improving your air quality and your water quality and the sanitation of your home, maybe go ahead, since it's spring cleaning, we just moved our clocks forward an hour, to go ahead and spend a little time vacuuming this week. Oh, go ahead and open up the windows of your home. Let's let in some of that fresh outdoor air. Remember, with coronavirus and viruses in general, their spread is only about 6 feet when someone is sneezing or coughing. That is what the CDC and everyone have found in their scientific studies. So remember, that is your wingspan approximately, is going to be the tip of your finger to the tip of your finger when you hold them out level to either side of you. That's going to be about your height. So for me, I'm 5'2", so it's 6 feet around me. For my bubble is going to be about half a foot in either direction from each of my fingertips. I live on the 3rd floor, so I am more than 6 feet above my neighbors and everything, so I can go ahead and open those windows, and you may also want to go ahead and open yours as well. If you keep that 6 feet in mind, it's okay to get some fresh air. It may even be super healthy for you. You may also want to go ahead and, like I said, vacuum, change out that air filter. If you have HEPA filters in your house, you can run those too. I have some HEPA air filters in my house, so we run those periodically just to get a lot of the particulates out of the air. And you can try things like going ahead and sanitizing your sink and your countertops just to give yourself the best opportunity possible with your health and your home wellness. Also, just keeping it clutter-free is going to help out if we get sick in particular, so you're not having to worry about excess clutter, and it will just make you feel a little bit better mentally as well. If you need some motivation for that, you can also go on Reddit and see the videos of Reddit Public Access, which I think are really interesting, where folks are cleaning up what they call their depression nests. So getting rid of all of the extra glasses and stuff in their rooms and just picking up in general, putting their laundry away rather than just setting it in the clothes chair that most of us have, and so on and so forth. So for your home wellness, it's just picking up a little bit to reduce some of the clutter and also sanitizing some of those surfaces to make sure that you do still have access to clean air and clean water in your home. We're going to go on another quick break, and when we come back, we are going to talk about some of the best forms of indoor exercise, particularly as it relates to seniors, since they are more at risk for coronavirus than many of the rest of us.
The GSMC Life and Happiness Podcast takes you on a journey of exploration. We'll discuss tried and true methods alongside the latest trends of how to best live your life to its fullest and happiest. From psychology to meditation, science to self-help books, the GSMC Life and Happiness Podcast will help you to discover what makes you happy and how you can live life being the best you possible. Download the GSMC Life and Happiness Podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you find podcasts. Just type GSMC in the search bar.
Prepare ourselves to be stuck at home as we all practice social distancing, isolation, and quarantine. Now we're going to talk a little bit about physical health, particularly in regards to indoor exercise. And this may be of a special interest for senior citizens, since senior citizens and folks with compromised immune systems may be more at risk for contracting any type of illness right now, as we're also in the middle of cold and flu season. So, in that regard, if we are going to be stuck indoors, a lot of what we may be practicing for these social distancing practices can be thought of as what we do during the winter time. A lot of us feel that we're stuck indoors during the winter time as well. And in those months, it can be more difficult to get out and get a lot of good exercise. Although, getting at least 30 minutes of aerobic exercise 5 times per week for a total of 150 hours per week is really important according to health experts. And that remains true even if we are going to be socially distancing ourselves. Now, that's easy in the summertime and also when folks are not afraid of going outdoors. So you can go out in the summer and you can get a brisk walk or, a good swim. But as we're worried about coronavirus, just like folks do in the wintertime, we may need to practice our exercise routines more indoors. So in that way, we want to think a little bit about some ways we can get exercise inside. If you guys go onto YouTube, there are a ton of different exercise regimens that you can follow. There's like the Tahitian Island Girl workout on there. So if you've been wanting to learn how to strengthen your core via dance, that is a really great way to do it. Kiara Lachey also has some really great like hip hop dance routines for working out and getting cardio, because that aerobic or cardio exercise is what we're talking about for that 30 minutes of exercise at least 5 times per week. You can also do the exercise routines that the Fitness Marshal has for cardio. So those are dance routines as well. And I really like those because Caleb and the other 2 dancers who tend to be in his videos, they rotate out. Sometimes it's different people. but they show you different modifications of ways that you can do it. And that helps meet you at your fitness level that you're currently at. So I really enjoy those, and they're some of my favorites. You can also go ahead and break out those old fitness videos you had from the 90s. So pop in those Denise Austin cardio exercises. Go ahead and do Sweat into the Oldies with Richard Simmons. Those are actually really fun, in my opinion, and they can be really good for you. If you're more of a gamer, you can also do DDR or Just Dance. A lot of older folks do play video games nowadays, and I think that we really underestimate how many older folks are out there participating in gaming. I think that that is really important for us to consider, and the fact that you can get exercise via gaming is important. If you have a Wii Fit, use it. Go ahead and break out these old toys that you haven't used in a while. You can jump rope if your ceiling is high enough, and make sure you're not going to catch it in a ceiling fan or anything. You can even just do jumping jacks. There are a lot of options if all you have is your own body. If you have a treadmill or any other types of aerobic exercise bikes and stuff like that in your home, then definitely use those. Those are the go-tos. You can also do some flexibility exercises. So you guys know I am a big proponent of flexibility exercises. I think a lot of times in health and wellness and fitness in particular, we lean hard into cardio and into weight training. And a lot of discussions are, should I do cardio or should I do more weight training? When a big factor in this is you need to do both, but also you really need to work on your flexibility. Flexibility prevents a lot of injuries as well. So we want to make sure that we are working on our range of motion by doing these flexibility exercises. Now I have a bum knee, so doing certain types of yoga poses can be very difficult for me, just as it may be for many of you, especially if you are a senior. So you can also do chair yoga. The popularity of yoga and Pilates is growing very quickly amongst people who are 50 and older. Some poses can be really painful challenges, and in that regard, if you are recovering from an injury or otherwise have some type of limited mobility, then chair yoga can help you out a lot while also reducing the risk of hurting yourself in the process. So you can also do that if you don't have a lot of time on your hands, but you want to exercise a bit more. So you can YouTube chair yoga as well. You don't have to go out and purchase a ton of videos. There's a lot freely available at our fingertips on the internet. You can also get a lot of free apps that way. Or if you want to pay for apps, some of these are as cheap as like $1.99, and a lot of them are one-time fees. So you can go ahead and get you an app or follow along on the internet with other forms of yoga or Pilates or even Tai Chi in that manner. It's just important to get you up and moving around a bit and improving our flexibility. Our bodies are not really built to sit in chairs all day, but that's what many of us do, as we discussed in a previous segment, where we leave our homes in the morning for work and we go and get in our car where we're sitting, and then we go to work and we are sitting in these chairs, and then we go to lunch and we are sitting, we go back to work, we're sitting, and then we get back in our chair where we're sitting, and then we go back home and sit down on the couch and binge television, and then finally lay flat as we are going to sleep. But I find that a lot of my friends also tend to sleep like in almost a fetal position, but a lot of times to me it just looks like they're sleeping in a chair position. So our muscles get used to sitting in these different positions, and then we're just training our bodies to be in a certain way. There's also that meme going around that says, what is your favorite sleep position and why is it tiger knee? And that means where you have one knee brought all the way up, like you are a fighter in a video game. So it's specifically referencing a video game. But tiger knee is where you just have that one leg drawn all the way up. And I find that I sleep that way a lot as well. It's more difficult for me to want to lay all the way flat because we are just sitting in chairs all day. So on the one hand, if chair yoga is what you need to do because you have an injury or otherwise have another type of limited mobility, go for it. If it's the only type of exercise you feel like you can cram into your day, do it. That exercise is better than no exercise. But if you're able to do actual floor yoga, go ahead and try that. I just have to modify some of the movements that I do in order to practice some of that yoga without hurting myself. But it's good for your joints and your muscles overall, and it will help strengthen them as time goes on. You may also consider using a standing desk. If you're going to be working from home, if you're one of the people who are fortunate like me to be able to do that as we move into more social distancing and companies authorizing folks to work at home, you may want to stand at your countertops and keep ergonomics in mind as well. So you want your shoulders to not be hunched up, and you want your computer to hopefully be about at eye level. And that can be a little bit more difficult when you're thinking about where your elbows are versus your wrists and your shoulders with what you have at home. But you can try to make that work for you if at all possible. Stack some books up, set your laptop on top of that, and go from there. Do what feels right for your body and practice that cardio at home, practice your flexibility, and also do your weight training. I know that for those of you who are more advanced in your weight training exercises, this is going to be a lot more difficult for you because you likely don't have a ton of these very heavy weights around your house. You probably have a gym membership, and that can be a little bit more difficult. So don't worry so much about losing your gains right now. You are primarily in a position of health, and just keep an eye on your diet. Remember, those abs are made in the kitchen. Do what you can for your weight training, and I hope it doesn't hurt too much as we lose some of these gains, because I know that a lot of us have worked really hard for them, but compromising our health and that of those around us is not going to be worth it in the long run just to maintain those gains. We'll do our best at home with our plyometrics, but in the end of the day, we have to accept some of the things that we cannot change. And unfortunately, we cannot change the fact that coronavirus is out there. And remember, Viktor Frankl says that when we are no longer able to change our circumstances, then we are challenged to change ourselves. So this may be an exercise of mental and emotional wellness for a lot of you out there. All right, we're going to go on another quick break. And when we come back, we're going to talk about maintaining our mental and emotional wellness as we are in social distancing.
Are you tired of the same old news? Are you sick of the seemingly endless political spin and negativity? The GSMC America Still Beautiful podcast is a weekly news podcast covering all the top positive and uplifting news stories. We cover stories that will inspire, uplift, and remind you of the good in the world. Tune into the Golden State Media Concepts America Still Beautiful podcast to get all the great and positive news stories of today. Download the GSMC America Still Beautiful podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you find podcasts. Just type GSMC in the search bar.
Physical health at home and some ways that we can do that as we practice social distancing going forward. Now we're going to talk a little bit about our mental health, because I feel that is going to be a big risk for a lot of folks as we move forward with these practices. There's a lot that you can do for your mental health. In many ways, we may be able to do more for our mental health than our physical health, as we are with our brains all the time and we can focus on what's going on with our minds. So as we are at home, we may start getting cabin fever. And one way we can combat that is by just trying to sit less. We sit a lot of the time, and it's very easy to just go ahead and sit. Also, I find that I'm really bad to lean on things. I am a terrible leaner. So if I am doing the dishes, I tend to lean against the sink, so my belly always gets wet as I make a mess doing the dishes. Or I will lean against the stove while I'm cooking, and that's not good for me because it means that my core is not engaged. So it's something that we don't tend to think about a lot. Our posture and how much we sit and how much we lean, in particular for me personally, is something I don't think of a lot. So I am trying to be more conscious about how much I'm leaning. And if you also spend a lot of time sitting or leaning, I want you guys to think about getting up and moving around a bit every hour or so, especially if you are working at home. Go ahead and get up, spend some time walking around a little bit. You can set an alarm to remind yourself, as long as you are working somewhere where you are able to set an alarm. I totally understand if you're doing something like tech support and you may be on the phone with clients or customers that your company may frown on an alarm going off, but perhaps you can set it to flashing or to being just vibrating to help you out with that. For chair-based activities, you can perform all types of activities for sitting. So we talked about chair yoga, and you can also go to the NHS website. That's going to be nhs.uk to go and get some more exercises from there. They have a huge list of sitting exercises for flexibility, balance, and strength. If you are wanting to play games, if you're a gamer like me, then try to play an active computer game. I still have my Wii with my Wii Fit board, and I like to use that one for working on my balance. I've mentioned that before in a previous podcast, and it's very helpful for me because as I'm practicing working on my balance, it's also working on my posture and my core. So you might not think that working on balance can be super helpful, but it really can in a lot of different ways. So you can use that Wii Fit exercise. You can also go ahead and do a hula hoop if you have room for that in your house. You can just do the motions of the hula hoop. They do that in one of the Wii games where you're using the balance board to perform those movements appropriately as well. But you don't even need the board to do that. You might feel silly at first, just hula hooping around your house without a hula hoop. But hey, you are working at home at this point. Who's going to be there to make fun of you? Aside from your family. They might razz you pretty hard, but that's what family's for, right? So in that regard, you can try that. You can try the Just Dance activities. Also, if you want to go on YouTube and just pull up Just Dance videos, you don't actually have to have the console. If you just want to follow along with the actions, you totally can. And they're pretty easy movements for most folks, especially if you check the difficulty settings on them. And you should be able to go ahead and perform those as well. Your kids can even follow along with you. And that way you don't even have to worry about having the console. You can also do online activities. There are tons of online activities for you to try at home. Just check them out. You can go ahead and download a coloring book. I bought a Stargate SG-1 coloring book once off the internet as a grown adult, and that was like last year because I like to color. I like art, and I love Stargate, and it brings me joy to use my Stargate coloring sheets. So I purchased that from someone, essentially off of Etsy, that kind of thing. You can get all kinds of free coloring sheets online, as well as some that you can purchase in PDF form and go ahead and just print out at home. you can draw your own pictures for this as well. Practice an art. It's really good for your mental health. You can work on playing an instrument that you've maybe been putting off that you have in the house. There are free classes online for that. There are paid classes online for that if you'd like to do that. And you can also just follow along on different websites that provide chords for you if you already know your chords. Go ahead and practice your art, practice music, practice whatever it is that's important to you. You can dance, and you can also dance while you're cooking. Dance around your kitchen. Pick up your cat. Go ahead and dance around the house with your cat if your cat likes that kind of thing. Some cats are not about it, but my cat only likes to be held while you're moving. So I'll just go ahead, put on the Rumors album by Fleetwood Mac, and walk around the house with my cat, and she and I both get exercise. It's great. She also likes to play tag with me, so play with your pets. Your pets are not going to be able to get coronavirus, so they can be some of your best playmates right now. And indeed, I think that a lot of our pets are going to be really psyched to spend this time with us. So although a lot of us are scared and concerned, it's also a good time to be appreciative, I think, for what we do have that is going well in our lives. So in that regard, maybe keep a gratitude journal while you're at home. Make the time to do these little things. If you're taking a break from work, maybe go ahead and just write down a little bit about gratitude at that time, the things that you're thankful for. Think about the things that you love. Make a list of things that you love. Journaling is not just about writing out how you feel in long form. You can do it as bullet points as well, and think about the things that we love. I think there's a lot of beauty to be found on the internet right now, as folks tend to exhibit some of the best parts of humanity in crises that are shared. They can also exhibit some of the worst, and I think a lot of folks are focusing on that right now. But maybe take a moment to Google folks chanting from their windows in China and people singing together through these open windows along empty streets in Italy as everyone sings these same folk songs together. You don't have to speak the same language to really appreciate it. I think that it's absolutely beautiful, and I love that in being apart, we are somehow also being brought more together, and you don't even need the internet for that. However, you can use the internet for that if you would like. I find that platforms such as Twitch, where I tend to stream under the name Sharknado Week, can be really helpful in bringing folks together and also providing a global perspective. The other night in my Twitch stream, we sat there and just talked from all over the globe about coronavirus in our area and our concerns. Turns out toilet paper is not just a problem in trying to obtain it in the US, it's also a problem all over the globe. And people from Serbia were telling me about it, as well as people who are traveling to Morocco, folks who are from Tunisia, which is on the northern aspect of the African continent, if you're unfamiliar with specifically where Tunisia is. Also folks who are from Nepal. There were people all over the world, including different parts of the U.S. Someone from Brazil came in at one point as well, and we could all share our concerns and also some laughter in the meantime to not feel as alone, even though we were all just sitting in our respective homes. I think that that is something that's really beautiful about the internet, and Twitch is a fantastic platform for that because you don't have to leave your home, and you also don't have to know these people. There's an anonymous component even in the friendships that you're making. So you don't have to give them your real names, but you also don't even have to already know these folks. You can just pop into a chat and then hang out for a bit, and if you decide it's not for you, then go ahead and pop out and go into one of the other millions of chats that there are out there. Twitch isn't just for gaming anymore. They also have a ton of different aspects there, like just chatting and music performances, all kinds of stuff. So I think it's very underutilized because folks tend to associate it with the gaming industry. And that's fair. There's a lot of gaming on there. But you can also just reach out and make these connections with people around the world. And I think that is absolutely beautiful. I encourage you guys to check it out. It's a free app. You can also access it via any web browser. It's super cool. You don't need to pay for anything. And if you have an Amazon Prime account, you can actually subscribe to someone for free. So following is always free. Subscriptions can cost a little bit of money, but a lot of folks do this for a living. And so it's a good way to help support other people right now as we are all having to move to working at home. And some folks who Twitch stream, actually a ton of them, have multiple jobs. And in that regard, they may not be able to do all of their jobs from home. So this can be a primary source of revenue for a lot of folks, and you can help them out for free without any money coming from your pocket, just by subscribing to their channel with your Amazon Prime account. It is not going to renew at the end of the month or anything. It's a monthly subscription, so you don't have to worry about being charged for anything either. It's pretty cool, I think, and it's another way that we can all support each other mentally and emotionally during this time. So check it out, go online, make some new friends, and support your friends any way that we can right now. We're going to go on another break, and when we come back, we're going to wrap up talking about some more emotional wellness and spiritual wellness. Stay tuned.
GSMC Beauty Tips Podcast gives you advice on everything from hair to fashion to skincare products. We'll talk about the latest trends in makeup, hairstyles, and anti-aging remedies. And we'll cover all of the newest fashion trends. If you have an interest in or questions about the beauty trends that might work best for you, the Golden State Media Concepts Beauty Tips Podcast has got you covered. Download the GSMC Beauty Tips Podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you find podcasts. Just type GSMC in the search bar.
Everything ranging from physical exercise to coloring and going online and making new friends to help us with our mental health as we move forward in social distancing. So now I want to talk a little bit more about emotional health in this time. So it is kind of going hand in hand with mental wellness. We're going to talk about emotional and spiritual wellness. Remember, everything is entwined and it is all holistic when it comes to health and wellness. So performing these different types of activities can help calm your mind. It can help you slow down that tendency to overanalyze that a lot of us have, and can lift your mood and make you feel more positive about life in the long run. I know that hearing about how things are around the world does make me feel a lot better. And in talking to my new internet friend from Serbia last night on the Twitch stream, I found that we have a lot more in common than we have differences. And that's something as an anthropologist that I know intellectually, but it's a really cool feeling to experience it anecdotally. And in that regard, I really wish a lot more people would do that. It didn't just make me feel better mentally about how coronavirus is being handled across the world right now, and it didn't just help me bring it into an intellectual perspective, but it also just made me laugh. Like, it brought laughter into my life because we are so similar. I would mention one thing and the person from Serbia would be like, "Oh my God, Robinson Crusoe is one of my favorite books too." And I was like, whoa, I don't know a lot of people who that is one of their favorite books. And I think that that's really super cool that we automatically share that. One night I was also in there talking about Kurt Vonnegut, who is another one of my favorite authors, and someone popped up into the chat with the username Kilgore Trout, and they'd never been in there before, but we became instant friends, and I was like, that is crazy timing that you popped in here today as I am holding my copy of The Sirens of Titan and my copy of Slaughterhouse-5, talking about how much I love these authors. It's crazy how big and how small the world is at the same time. And it really helps me emotionally and spiritually to experience that. So it's not just about my mental health at that point. It's just a lot of emotional and spiritual wellness can come from these shared experiences. And I think it's beautiful that we can have that with strangers. It's also beautiful when we have those with friends. But with strangers, there's a little bit of magic in it in a way, because you're finding this out about people for the first time, and your friends already know you at this point. And that can still be exciting and fun, and there is so much emotional and spiritual wellness to come from being known and truly loved as you are. But it's also really cool to have these magical encounters with absolute strangers regarding things that are kind of random trivia for your life. So in that way, I think that that's really helpful for emotional wellness, especially in discovering that we're more alike than we are different. People are people all throughout the globe. So in that way, I want you guys to focus on your emotional and spiritual wellness as well. If you are a religious person and you're into organized religion, perhaps make a little bit of time while you're home to read some of your religious text. If you're more orthopraxic than orthodoxic, then make some time for the practices of your religious beliefs while you're at home. Take a moment to pray or meditate. These things are important to not just our spiritual wellness, but also our emotional and mental health. It can help you feel a lot better and grounded and centered. If you are not particularly spiritual or religious, that's okay. I'm talking about the human spirit, not necessarily any religious component. It's important to care for our spirit, and that is really kind of nebulous for me. I tend to be more agnostic, so that can be more difficult for me to define, but it is just kind of a central component of being human. It is the part of us that allows us to consider concepts like nihilism and existentialism that non-human animals are not necessarily believed to be capable of. So in that way, maybe if you are more agnostic, read some philosophy. You can read some of the works of Marcus Aurelius if you're more of a Stoic, or you can go ahead and read about Diogenes if you like to stir stuff up. Go ahead and just check out some different podcasts in that regard, or read some books if you have all of these books on your bookshelf that you keep hoarding without being able to read all of them, like I tend to do. So I plan to spend some of my social isolation time, or rather social distancing time, in reading a lot of these books. I read like 6 of them at a time, and Roger just bought me a couple more of those Robert Johnson books, so I can do some more of my inner work from a scientific and psychological perspective, and in that way, that is nurturing my own spirituality, my human spirit, rather, in a way that can still comply with my agnostic beliefs. So I encourage you guys to, no matter what you believe in at this point, to go ahead and nurture that as you're at home. This can be very helpful in turning ourselves a little bit inward and thinking about who we are as people versus who we want to be, and to start practicing that self-love and self-care so that we can reflect it outward to others. I think that kindness is one of the most important traits that we can have, and one of the most important actions and behaviors that we can exhibit, and habits that we can cultivate. So this is a really good time to practice that. And remember to practice kindness with yourself as well. If you do end up coming down with coronavirus, you can still reach out to other people via the internet. You are not alone. You are not a social pariah. You just have to isolate yourself physically. You don't necessarily have to do that spiritually or mentally or emotionally. We are here for you, and even if you don't have a close internal network of friends you can reach out to, there are strangers on the internet who would love to speak with you and to become your friend. Remember, strangers are just friends. We haven't met yet. At one point, we were strangers with everyone. So keep that in mind as we move forward, and be kind to yourself. Do what you can to keep yourself and others safe. But if something does happen, remember that there are folks out here to cheer you on and to cheer you up. So just reach out on the internet. And even though it can be a toxic place at times, I find that it can also be a place of overwhelming kindness and love. You just have to be willing to turn on the light. So I hope that this has been helpful for you guys. I hope that you're able to sit down with yourself and think about what is important to you. So I've made recommendations for some ideas for cultivating your spiritual and physical and mental and emotional wellness and health while you are indoors and you're practicing social distancing. But remember, it's okay to open a window every now and then. We want to take care of ourselves, get some fresh air. Even if you're not comfortable opening up the window, open up the blinds and the curtains. Let some sunlight in, because your body is going to need that as well. And if you're able to let the sunlight in your life in other ways, like reaching out to folks to remind them that you love them and that you're thinking of them, or reaching out to folks and saying, hey, this makes me feel vulnerable, but I'm kind of feeling lonely right now as I'm practicing my social distancing. Can we talk for a little bit? I think you'll find a lot of folks are going to be very open to that, even if you haven't talked in a long time. So be that light for yourselves and be that light for others as we all move forward together with our concerns, but also being proactive in educating ourselves and in keeping ourselves healthy and well during this era of a pandemic. Thank you for listening to the GSMC Health and Wellness Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I would like to ask that you please remember to subscribe to the show, and writing a nice review always really helps us. Also, if you could please follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, I'd appreciate it. Thank you kindly, and have a good night.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Health and Wellness Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network, from movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.